You feel it long before you know how to name it. A quiet tension beneath your ribs, like something inside you is watching the life you built with calm suspicion. It is subtle at first, a faint pressure, a soft whisper, a sense that not everything you carry belongs to you. And even if you try to ignore it, it waits with patience. It waits because it knows. It knows that the unconscious never sleeps. It knows that sooner or later, it will rise to break whatever is false. You move through your days trying to hold everything together. You keep the image intact. You keep the mask polished. You keep the story coherent enough to pass as truth. And still, there is a part of you that watches from a distance. A part that sees the cracks. A part that understands that the soul cannot breathe inside what is artificial. This part waits for its moment. It waits for the first fracture. It waits for the moment when the facade becomes too heavy to sustain. You tell yourself you are fine. You tell yourself everything makes sense. Yet deep inside, something feels slightly off. You feel it when you wake before the sun. You feel it when you are alone in the evening. A quiet discomfort, a strange gravity pulling you inward. You sense a river moving under the surface. Something ancient, something true, something that will not let you pretend forever. There are moments when it becomes louder. A sudden memory, a dream that lingers like smoke, a conversation that opens an old door inside your chest. You do not plan these moments. They arrive like shadows crossing your path. You feel your body shift. You feel your breath change. For a second, you glimpse the truth behind the truth. And even if you turn away, the image stays with you. It becomes the seed of a quiet rebellion. You might not know it yet, but the unconscious is already rearranging your world. Not to punish you, not to ruin anything, but to dismantle what was never real. Every false story, every borrowed identity, every relationship built on fear instead of soul. The unconscious does not break anything that is true. It only breaks what is fragile, what is performative, what no longer serves the life you were meant to live. You feel the tension because you are standing at a threshold, a doorway between who you have been and who you are becoming. And even if you resist, the pull grows stronger. Something inside you wants to breathe again. Something wants to open. Something wants to return to the center you abandoned long ago. You do not need to understand this process yet. You only need to feel the quiet tremor beneath your thoughts. That small vibration is the beginning. It is the first sign that the unconscious is waking you from the dream. It is the first sign that your deeper self is preparing to dismantle whatever no longer reflects your truth. And yet, beneath it all, something still calls your name. Something soft, something patient, something honest. A presence rising like dawn behind a long night. A light that does not blind but reveals. A reminder that whatever breaks now breaks only to free you. This is the moment before the shift. The moment when life begins to whisper the truth you avoided. The moment when the unconscious starts moving toward the surface. And even if you do not know exactly what it will break, a part of you knows why. Because what is false cannot remain, and what is real cannot be lost. There is a reason the unconscious never rushes. It moves with the rhythm of roots, patient and deliberate, sliding beneath the surface of your life with quiet certainty. It knows the architecture of your inner world. It knows the corners where you hide the pieces of yourself you were taught to reject. It knows the forgotten rooms where old wounds keep their watch. It knows the masks you crafted so carefully that even you started believing in them. And it knows when these masks have outlived their purpose. You feel this movement as a subtle unease, a shadow crossing the edge of your awareness, a whisper that something is not aligned. You try to ignore it, but it lingers like the aftertaste of a dream. It waits for your attention. It waits for a moment of stillness. In that quiet, you sense a presence rising from the depths. It is not hostile. It is not cruel. It simply carries the authority of truth. This presence does not argue with you. It does not negotiate. It reveals. It shows you the difference between who you are and who you pretend to be. Sometimes softly, like a gentle shift in the wind. Sometimes abruptly, like a mirror shattering on the ground. The unconscious speaks in symbols. It does not use the language of logic. It speaks through dreams that feel like warnings, through synchronicities that seem too precise to ignore, through emotions that erupt with no explanation, through sudden clarity that feels both terrifying and liberating. You begin to notice how the false layers of your identity strain under the pressure of this truth. You feel it in your relationships, in the way some connections suddenly feel hollow. You feel it in your work, in the way certain ambitions lose their charm. You feel it in your body, in the tightness that builds when you force yourself to continue in directions that no longer match your soul. The unconscious uses discomfort as a compass. It uses tension as a signal. It uses the collapse of illusions as a form of liberation. From a Jungian perspective, this collapse is not chaos. It is alchemy. It is the fire that burns what is outdated so that something living can emerge. The unconscious does not destroy for the sake of destruction. It dissolves what no longer carries vitality. It dismantles structures that imprison the psyche. It returns you to the path you abandoned when you learned to survive by betraying parts of yourself. It calls you back to the center where your true voice lives. This process can feel like walking through a dense forest at night. You hear things you cannot see. You sense movements behind the trees. The air feels heavy with potential. You do not know the path, but something guides you. A faint light between the branches. A memory of who you once were before fear shaped your choices. You follow not because you are certain, but because something inside you recognizes the direction. In this forest, you encounter the shadow, not as an enemy, but as the guardian of truth. The shadow carries everything you suppressed, the anger you swallowed, the desire you denied, the intuition you ignored, the dreams you abandoned, the boundaries you never learned to defend. The shadow is the mirror you avoided, the one that shows you the face you forgot. When you meet it, you feel discomfort because truth is rarely gentle. But this truth is yours. It comes from within. It arrives to restore what was lost. The unconscious often breaks what is false through relationships. You cling to someone for identity or safety. You build a story around them. Then suddenly the story cracks. The illusion collapses. You see the truth you did not want to see. It hurts, yet somewhere inside you, something exhales. The collapse frees you from a version of yourself that was too small. The pain becomes the doorway. The ending becomes the beginning. At other times, the break appears in your work or ambitions. You pursue a path that once made sense, then one day it feels empty. You cannot force yourself into it anymore. The motivation dries up. The structure collapses. It looks like failure, but it is not. The unconscious is redirecting your energy towards something more aligned. It is removing the scaffolding that held the false self upright. Without the collapse, you would remain trapped. Symbols appear during this transition. The river that flows beneath your awareness, carrying memories and instincts. The fire that burns through illusion. The forest that protects the forgotten parts of your psyche. The temple you build every time you honor the truth. The night that envelopes you before transformation. The aurora that signals rebirth. These symbols shape the language of the unconscious. They guide you without using words. They speak through imagery that resonates with the soul. You begin to understand that you were never meant to sustain a life built on fear or performance. You were meant to outgrow these skins. The unconscious breaks what is false because it protects your essence. It refuses to let your life become a performance that starves your inner world. It invites you back to yourself. And yet, this invitation feels like a gentle hand on your shoulder. It does not push. It does not demand. It simply opens a door inside your chest. A door you once closed to survive. A door that now leads to freedom. You feel a pull toward this opening. A soft awakening. A quiet recognition of your own truth rising from the depths. The unconscious waits for your courage. It waits for the moment you stop running from yourself. It waits for the moment you feel the call. In that moment, the breaking begins to make sense. It stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like revelation. You begin to see that everything falling apart is part of a larger pattern. A movement toward authenticity. A return to your soul. And beneath it all, the light grows stronger. A soft glow behind the darkness. A reminder that truth does not destroy you. It frees you. You feel the unraveling before you witness it. It begins as a sensation in the body, a slow tightening in the chest, a faint tremble beneath the surface of ordinary days. Your breath feels slightly heavier. Your thoughts drift toward questions you never wanted to ask. There is a quiet ache that wraps around your ribs, like an invisible hand pressing from within. You sense that something in your life no longer fits, yet you keep moving as if nothing has changed. You hope the feeling will fade. It does not. It deepens. It follows you through the hours like a shadow waiting for your attention. You try to hold on to the familiar. You repeat old stories. You cling to routines that once made sense. You lean on relationships that kept you anchored. But the center feels loose. The ground beneath you shifts, subtle at first, then unmistakable. The unconscious is stirring. It is rising with the patience of tides. You feel its movement inside you even when you cannot name it. A memory you thought you buried starts glowing in the dark. An emotion you once silenced begins to vibrate in your throat. A desire you pushed aside starts knocking against the walls you built. This is the moment when discomfort turns into a message. The tension is not random. The ache is not a flaw. The heaviness is not weakness. It is the voice of the soul pressing against the shell you outgrew. Jung knew this pressure well. He understood that the psyche rebels against confinement. It refuses to live inside narratives that betray its essence. When the unconscious senses that your life has become too narrow, it begins to push. Gently at first, then firmly, then with force. It pushes through dreams, through emotions, through sudden clarity, through the feeling that something must change, even if you cannot yet explain why. At this stage, the unconscious often speaks through mirrors, not the physical kind, but the human ones. A person enters your life and reflects a truth you avoided. Their presence feels intense, almost electric. You cannot ignore them. They trigger emotions you thought you mastered. They expose the wound behind your strength. You feel seen in ways that unsettle you. You feel confronted in ways that wake you. This person becomes a mirror the unconscious uses to reveal the fracture between the life you live and the life you long for. And as you face this mirror, illusions begin to crumble. There are nights when the breaking feels like walking through a forest without light. The trees crowd around you. The air feels thick. You hear distant echoes that sound like your own forgotten voice. In this darkness, the unconscious becomes both guide and fire. It burns what is false. It illuminates what is hidden. The light is faint, yet it is enough to reveal the path beneath your feet. You begin to sense that the forest is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary, a place where you are forced to confront the truth you abandoned, a place where you meet the parts of yourself waiting to be reclaimed. As the breaking continues, you notice a shift in your dreams. They feel heavier, more symbolic. Rivers appear. Flames rise. Doors open and close. Shadows watch you with a calm that feels strangely familiar. You understand that the dream world is not just a theater of the mind. It is the language of the unconscious. It shows you what you cannot yet admit. It shows you what is cracking. It shows you what must be released. The symbols are not random. They are messages, warnings, invitations. Then comes the moment when a fracture becomes undeniable. A relationship collapses. A job dissolves. A belief shatters. A version of yourself slips away like smoke. The loss feels sharp, almost unbearable. Yet beneath the pain, something inside you exhales. You feel a strange lightness, a strange clarity, a strange truth rising like dawn through fog. The unconscious has broken something, but it broke only what was false. The real remains. The true begins to surface. And as you stand among the fragments of the life you outgrew, a question rises quietly from within. A question you cannot avoid. A question that pulls you deeper into the next stage of your transformation. What is emerging now that the illusion is gone? There is a peculiar stillness that follows the first break. Not silence, but a pause. A suspension between what has collapsed and what is yet to rise. You stand inside this in-between space with a mixture of relief and fear. Part of you feels lighter, freed from the weight of what no longer matched your inner truth. Another part feels exposed, almost naked, unsure of who you are without the structures that once held you together. This is the valley between identities. This is the moment when the unconscious begins its deeper work. You start noticing how much of your life was built on borrowed expectations. You see the habits you adopted to please, the roles you stepped into to avoid abandonment, the ambitions you pursued because they looked admirable from the outside. You feel the emptiness behind these pursuits now. The illusion has been pierced. What once felt like purpose now feels like performance. What once felt stable now reveals itself as a fragile shell. You realize you were carrying a life that did not belong to you. The unconscious broke it so you could see the truth. In this space, emotions rise with unfamiliar intensity. Grief arrives without warning. Anger moves like a fire you cannot contain. Fear whispers that without the old structure, you might collapse. These emotions are not setbacks. They are signals. The unconscious uses them as torches in the dark. They illuminate the unmet needs you ignored. They highlight the boundaries you never honored. They reveal the parts of you that remained in exile for too long. Each feeling is a visitor carrying a message. Each message is a step toward remembering who you are beneath the conditioning. You might feel the urge to rebuild quickly, to replace what was lost with something new. But the unconscious resists rushed construction. It refuses to let you recreate the same illusion in a different form. It slows you down. It forces you to sit with the emptiness. It asks you to feel the rawness instead of numbing it. This pause is not punishment. It is purification. It is the clearing of inner space so your next foundation can be built on truth rather than fear. This stage feels like walking beside a river at night. The current moves steadily. The water reflects faint glimmers of moonlight. You sense the presence of something flowing, something ancient, something alive. You do not see the full landscape yet, but you feel its outline. You begin to understand that the river is your instinct. It pulls you toward what is real. It guides you without demanding certainty. If you listen closely, you hear the soft murmuring of your own inner knowing. Dreams become more vivid now. Symbols sharpen. A door appears, half open, revealing a faint glow behind it. A forest clearing invites you with its strange familiarity. A temple rises in the distance, its entrance shrouded in shadow. Fire appears in subtle forms, warming rather than destroying. These images do not speak in words. They speak in sensations. They speak in recognition. They speak in the language of the soul. It is often during this stage that you begin to meet the shadow more consciously, not as an adversary, but as a guide. You see the anger you never expressed, the longing you never admitted, the authenticity you hid to be loved. You realize the shadow is not dark because it is evil. It is dark because it has been forgotten. Every rejected part waits in this darkness like seeds beneath the soil. When the unconscious breaks what is false, these seeds begin to stir. They push upward. They reach for the light. They demand your attention. And as these parts rise, you begin to feel something unexpected. A sense of self returning. A sense of truth forming. A sense of inner solidity quietly rebuilding itself from within. It does not come as a sudden revelation. It arrives like dawn through dense fog. Soft, gentle, persistent. The unconscious is not destroying you. It is reshaping you. It is integrating the fragments you abandoned. It is guiding you back toward wholeness. But before this integration can complete, another shift begins to move under the surface. A deeper current, a stronger truth, a new clarity forming in the dark. It is the moment when you begin to see what must rise from the ruins. There comes a moment when the inner landscape begins to change. You feel it first as a subtle warmth in the center of your chest, a quiet loosening, as if something once clenched is finally learning how to breathe again. The heaviness that followed the breaking does not vanish, but it softens. It becomes a companion rather than a threat. You sense that the unconscious is no longer pulling things apart. It is gathering something, rearranging something, preparing the ground for what comes next. This shift feels fragile, almost delicate, like the first glimmer of light after a long night. You begin noticing small truths rising from the silence. They arrive in moments of stillness you did not plan. A realization while washing your hands. A memory resurfacing with new meaning. A sentence forming in your mind that feels wiser than your thoughts. These moments land gently, yet they hold the weight of revelation. You feel your inner world rearranging itself around them. You sense that you are no longer standing inside the ruins. You are standing inside the beginning of a new structure built from the inside out. This is the stage when the unconscious starts guiding you toward what is real. It brings you back to your instincts. It shows you what feels alive. It reveals the choices that bring calm rather than confusion. You notice how your body reacts differently. Some paths give you a sense of expansion. Others make your breath falter. Some people feel like fire that warms. Others feel like smoke that suffocates. You begin to trust these sensations. You understand they are not random. They are the compass of the inner self, the one that remained buried beneath expectations for too long. Symbolically, this stage feels like stepping into a clearing within a deep forest. You can still hear the echoes of the darkness behind you, but the air is lighter here. The ground feels different under your feet. The trees open just enough to let a soft glow pass through. You feel watched, but not by fear. Something in the landscape seems to recognize you, as if the forest was waiting for this moment. There is a sense of arrival, a quiet recognition that this clearing is the place where something new begins. In this clearing, your shadow stands beside you, no longer hidden in the dark. You see the parts of yourself you exiled. You recognize their strength. You acknowledge their pain. You begin to accept them not as flaws, but as essential pieces of your wholeness. The anger you denied becomes courage. The fear you avoided becomes awareness. The longing you buried becomes direction. You understand now that the shadow was never an enemy. It was a guardian of the parts that survived your own self-abandonment. As this reconciliation deepens, your dreams shift once again. They become clearer, more coherent. You walk through long corridors and find open doors instead of closed ones. Rivers flow toward you rather than away. Fires burn softly, illuminating rather than consuming. You see temples with wide entrances, inviting you to step inside. These images reflect a growing harmony within. They show the unconscious no longer breaking, but integrating, no longer dismantling, but building. With this harmony comes a new kind of clarity. You begin to see where you misled yourself. You recognize the stories you clung to because they felt safe. You see the versions of yourself you performed to be accepted. You understand the ways you tried to earn love by shrinking. These realizations do not shame you. They free you. They show you that what you thought was you was only a fragment. The deeper self, the one rising now, carries a solidness that feels undeniable. And in this clarity, something profound happens. You begin to sense what your life could become if aligned with your truth. You feel a pull toward authenticity, not as a dramatic transformation, but as a natural unfolding. You feel drawn to choices that nourish your soul. You feel drawn to connections that resonate with your essence. You feel drawn to paths that feel like home rather than performance. This pull is not loud. It is steady. It is the river finding its course again. As you stand fully in this clearing, breathing with your whole being, you realize the unconscious has led you here with intention. Every collapse, every ache, every shadow, every dream was part of a larger movement. A movement toward the truth rising inside you. And now, as this truth begins to take form, a deeper transformation begins to unfold. The stage is set for transcendence. The inner architecture is ready to expand. The light is preparing to lift you into a new way of living. All that remains is to step into what you are becoming. You begin to notice a quiet gathering inside you, as if the fragments of your inner world are slowly finding their places again. Not in the old pattern, not in the structure you once defended, but in a new formation shaped by truth rather than fear. This gathering feels like the slow ignition of a flame. It warms without burning. It illuminates without demanding. You sense that the unconscious has shifted from dismantling to revealing, from breaking to aligning, from darkness to a light that rises gently, like the first colors of dawn spreading across a distant horizon. Your breath deepens. Your pace softens. Something within you relaxes in a way that feels ancient, as if a part of your soul has finally returned home after wandering for years. You feel the ache in your chest loosen. You sense the old wounds beginning to breathe differently, no longer clinging to pain, but opening to understanding. You realize that the breaking was never meant to diminish you. It was meant to clear the way, to make room, to open the inner corridors that had been sealed by years of self-protection. As these corridors open, the symbols return with new clarity. The forest becomes less of a labyrinth and more of a sanctuary. You walk among the trees and feel their presence as allies rather than shadows. The river flows beside you, guiding rather than pulling. The fire burns steadily, not as destruction but as warmth. You see the temple again, its entrance no longer shrouded in shadow. It stands before you with doors open, inviting you to step inside and witness what has been waiting. Inside this temple, the silence feels different. Not empty, but full. A living silence. A silence that listens. You feel your own awareness expand, stretching gently beyond the boundaries you once believed defined you. You begin to sense the presence of the self, not as a concept or an idea, but as a living center radiating from within. This presence feels like a calm sun in the heart of your being. It does not demand. It does not judge. It simply is. And in its presence, you begin to dissolve the illusions that kept you small. There is a feeling that rises during this stage, a feeling difficult to describe but impossible to ignore. It is the sensation of returning to yourself, of standing inside your own center without fear, of recognizing the difference between your wounds and your worth. You start to feel a quiet loyalty to your truth, not the truth you performed for acceptance, but the truth that breathes from the depths of your soul. This loyalty feels sacred. It feels like a vow whispered in silence. And with this vow comes a new way of seeing. You look at your past not as a series of mistakes, but as a journey through layers of forgetting and remembering. You see the faces of those who hurt you and understand that they, too, were trapped in their own shadows. You see the choices you made while afraid and feel compassion rather than regret. You begin to understand that the unconscious broke what was false to free what was real. Every collapse becomes part of a larger coherence. Every loss becomes a doorway to a deeper gain. Every ending becomes a beginning disguised in shadow. In this rising clarity, your relationships transform. You no longer cling to those who drain your spirit. You no longer chase validation in places where your soul starves. You feel drawn to connections that mirror your growth, to people who speak with the authenticity you are reclaiming. Your boundaries sharpen, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. You start choosing with a calm that feels rooted. You begin moving through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has returned to their own inner temple. Your dreams shift again. Now the imagery is brighter. Rivers sparkle with light. Forests open into spacious fields. Fires burn clean and warm. You walk through temples with high ceilings and golden walls. These symbols reflect the transformation taking place within you. They show the integration of the shadow. They show the emergence of inner unity. They show the alignment between conscious and unconscious. You feel the two worlds joining, like the meeting of night and dawn. With this integration comes a sense of transcendence, not as escape, but as expansion. You begin to perceive yourself not as fragments, but as a whole being moving through life with increasing clarity. You sense the threads connecting your past, your present, and the potential you are stepping toward. This transcendent state feels gentle. It feels like a widening of perspective. You see your struggle as part of a larger pattern. You feel a subtle awe toward the intelligence of your inner world. You recognize that your psyche has been guiding you toward this moment all along. And as this realization settles, something shifts inside your breath. You feel an inner alignment that moves like a river of light through your body. You feel grounded yet lifted, rooted yet open. It is as if the unconscious has placed a soft hand on your shoulder, not to pull you down, but to steady you for the path ahead. This steadiness feels sacred. It feels like a blessing from the depths of your own being. You know now that what broke did not belong to you. You know that what remains carries the weight of truth. You feel the beginning of a quiet devotion rising inside you, a devotion to your inner life, to your authenticity, to the unfolding of your path. And this devotion draws you toward a new level of clarity, the clarity of communion, the clarity of living aligned with the truth that has awakened within you. The clarity of a soul returning to itself after a long night. The clarity that signals the closing of one chapter and the opening of another, carried gently by the light you now hold. And so you stand at the threshold once more, this time not in fear, but in reverence. What rises next is peace. You feel the peace arrive slowly, like a soft tide touching the shore after a long and restless night. It does not come with fireworks. It does not announce itself. It moves with the gentleness of something that has always belonged to you. A quiet returning, a settling, a remembrance. You notice how your breath deepens without effort, how your mind softens without command, how your body loosens as if it finally believes that it is safe to rest again. This peace is not an escape from life. It is the space where you finally meet yourself with honesty. You begin to see that the entire journey was a movement toward this moment. The breaking, the darkness, the mirrors, the shadow, the forest, the river, all of it guiding you gently toward a truth you once feared, but now welcome. You realize that the unconscious never acted against you. It acted for you. It acted to remove what dimmed your inner light. It acted to dissolve the versions of you that could not carry the fullness of your soul. The unconscious breaks what is false because your deeper self refuses to live behind a mask. And as this understanding settles inside your chest, something opens. A softness, a tenderness, a quiet compassion for the person you were before the breaking began. You see how hard you tried. You see the weight you carried. You see the choices you made out of fear, longing, confusion, hope. And in this seeing, you forgive yourself, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a gentle recognition of your humanity. You understand that every step you took, even the ones that hurt, led you back to this point of clarity. You feel connected now, not to an ideal, but to your own center. A center that feels like a slow-burning flame, steady, warm, trustworthy. You know that this light will guide you through the days to come, not by shouting, but by whispering, not by forcing, but by reminding. You begin to walk differently with more presence. You speak differently with more truth. You choose differently with more awareness. Life feels less like something happening to you and more like something unfolding through you. There is a sense of communion growing inside you, a quiet union between the conscious and the unconscious. You feel the two parts of your psyche reaching for each other, like separate rivers merging into one. The division softens. The tension dissolves. The inner world begins to move as a single rhythm. This rhythm feels sacred. It feels like the pulse of your true nature rising to the surface. It feels like coming home. And now, as you stand in this new place within yourself, you sense a gentle invitation. Not a task, not an obligation, a simple invitation to stay awake to your own truth. To notice the subtle movements of your inner world, to listen when the unconscious whispers, to trust when something inside you begins to shift again. You understand now that breaking is not the enemy. Breaking is the path. Breaking is the doorway through which your soul steps into its next form. You carry this understanding with you as you move forward. You carry it as a quiet promise. A promise that you will not abandon yourself again. A promise that you will not ignore the tension that warns you when something becomes false. A promise that you will honor the light and the shadow with equal respect. This promise feels simple yet profound. It is the beginning of a new relationship with your inner life. And so you breathe. You feel the peace resting in your chest like a soft glow. You feel the clarity settling behind your eyes. You feel the world around you shift just slightly, enough for you to sense that something essential has realigned. The night within you has passed. The dawn has begun. And in this dawn, you hear a quiet voice rising from the depths of your being. A voice that has waited patiently for you to return. It whispers only one thing. You are here. You are whole. You are home.